Welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners issues and updates with our County Administrator Gary Schmidt on this November 1st, 2022. Isn't November 1st designated as All Saints Day?
Yes.
I believe so. Martha, being of our Catholic background, yes, that's not lost on us. Thank you very much. Gary, what's up first?
Thank you, Chair Smith. Today, my plan is let's do all the consent agenda items first for both HAC and the county, and then we'll come back to Wes and then do the other county issues items. So we'll start. Chair, would you please convene as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County?
Yes, I will recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as a Housing Authority of Clackamas County. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're now meeting as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. Online is Housing Commissioner Ann Leenstra. Are you there, Ann?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Good morning. These are requests for consent agenda. Item 1, approval of a personal services contract with Clackamas Service Center for mobile and/or site-based research and engagement, site-based outreach and engagement services for Clackamas County residents experiencing homelessness, and assignment of the contract to Clackamas County. Contract value is $186,500 for 8 months. Funding is through Metro Supportive Housing Services Funds. No county general funds are involved. Adam Brown is Deputy Director of Health, Housing, Human Services, which also is the oversight of Housing Authority. Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Adam Brown here. So this contract, which will be administered by the Housing and Community Development Division after contract assignment, uses Supportive Housing Services funds for new mobile and site-based outreach and engagement services for county residents experiencing homelessness. This includes providing food, access to hot showers, mail services, clothing, connections to health providers, referrals to benefits and resources, barrier reduction, and providing an entry point for access to permanent housing.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Fisher.
So I think you alluded to it, but I'm just wanting to understand, we are aligning our supportive housing services under H3S. So tell me why this contract is coming through the Housing Authority.
Yeah, Commissioner, great question. So prior to the current fiscal year, the Supportive Housing Services funds were being administered under the purview of the Housing Authority. So they conducted the procurement, the initial procurement for these services. And so because that authority rests with the Housing Authority itself, we need to initiate the contract on that side and then assign it to the county.
Okay, so that's probably later in another consent agenda.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So this one and the next one are very similar, and you'll see both of those with mirroring actions under H3S.
Got it. Thank you.
Seeing no objections, go ahead.
Item 2, approval of a personal services contract with Northwest Housing Alternatives for emergency shelter services and assignment of the contract to Clackamas County. Contract value is $560,000 for 8 months. Funding is through Metro Supportive Housing Services Funds. No county general funds are involved.
So this is similar to the last one, as I mentioned. This contract uses SHS funds to expand access to transitional housing opportunities for homeless families through the use of non-congregate motel shelter. Program participants will receive housing navigation and placement services, long-term supportive housing case management, and rental assistance to connect them with help to maintain their permanent housing.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 3, approval of a board resolution to accept affordable housing stabilization funds and reduce tenant debt owed to the Housing Authority. Total value of the funding is up to $205,968.75. Funding is through the state of Oregon. No county general funds are involved.
So this is a really great opportunity for the Housing Authority. As you know, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, a significant amount of rent assistance resources have been made available to help local households struggling to pay their rent. The Housing Authority, as a public housing landlord to low-income county residents, has assisted its tenants in seeking rent assistance, including for past due rent. Many payments from funding agencies have been remitted to HAC on behalf of tenants as the landlord. However, the Housing Authority still has a significant amount of rent debt that has accumulated over the course of the pandemic, putting households owing that back rent at risk of eviction and homelessness and negatively impacting the Housing Authority's financial position. The state has recently made $5 million available for affordable housing providers, including public housing authorities, to reduce back rent debt for households that has accumulated between April 1st, 2020 and April 30th, 2022, and stabilize the financial position of these affordable housing agencies. So this is reflective of our efforts to secure that funding, which is being administered by Home Forward on behalf of the state.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Savas.
I don't have any quarrel with this at all, but I do have some questions, and that is the 205,000 reflective of that liability for these folks for Clackamas County only?
That's right, yeah. So the Housing Authority, as part of this application process, went through, all of its books for all of its properties and came up with the total liability amount, which is at $205,000. So we expect to get some portion of that back from Home Forward after they have done their assessment of the total need and then distribute the funds proportionally to all the agencies that are applying for the funds.
Okay. So my main question is, what is the likelihood or the mechanisms that are going to help these folks maintain the roof over their head? Ongoing, is there a high propensity for them to be successful? Or when this money runs out, even though this is back rent, I understand that, if this money runs out, are they able to stand on their own? And are they also receiving supportive housing services dollars to carry on forward?
So, that's a really good question. We know that some of the economic impacts associated with the pandemic are subsiding, right? And we have resident services team and others that are always working with our tenants to help grow self-sufficiency, right? And help them gain access to income and the other supports that they need. So I don't have a specific answer for you about prospectively what this looks like for this group of tenants, but we're always doing whatever we can to engage in eviction prevention activities, including things like income acquisition.
Okay, so the program that Vahid has talked about, where we start tracking individuals, right, that are experiencing or on the edge of homelessness, houselessness, are these folks are being tracked as well?
No, not. So are you referring to like the Built for Zero initiative or things like that? We do track homeless services and folks who are accessing homeless services in HMIS, you know that. These are actually public housing residents of the Housing Authority. So there may or may not be a connection between these folks that are residing in our public housing and folks who are experiencing homelessness and receiving services that would generate an entry into HMIS.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Brown. So this $205,000 is going to support the debt to the Housing Authority of 83 families. Is that correct?
It's actually
According to your
160 total households,
Okay.
83 current households and 77 former households.
Okay. So is this going to take care of all the rent, debt owed by Housing Authority tenants? Is this going to bring us up to a point where we're caught up, or they're caught up?
This is back rent debt for the period of eligibility, April 1st, 2020 through April 30th, 2022. So I can get more information from Tony Carter and the Housing Authority team about the whole universe of back rent debt and what portion this is. The board regularly sees us bringing actions, actually on a quarterly basis, to write off back rent debt. So that's a regular fiscal maintenance practice of truing up, our ongoing operating budgets with debt owed by former tenants.
One more question now. Do you have any ability to affect the current tenants' ability to pay rent so that we don't have to do this again? What's going on there to help them out?
Yeah, and that really was similar to Commissioner Savas's question, right? So that's the importance of our resident services and the programs that are helping self-sufficiency. We know that the folks who are residing in this public housing are chronically low income, suffering maybe one or more disabling conditions that are limiting. They may be on, government benefits for income, such as disability or Social Security where, their income ceiling is actually pretty low, but we're always working with the tenants to help with self-sufficiency where we can, help income acquisition so that there isn't this rent burden, both for them as our residents and for the housing authority as a landlord.
Okay, so this funding really is critical to keep people from becoming homeless, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, doing away with the back rent that prevents evictions.
I got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing no objections to moving forward, thank you.
All right, that is it for the Housing Authority. Thank you, Housing Commissioner Leenstra. Thank you, Adam. Chair, would you now please convene as the Board of County Commissioners?
I will recess as a housing authority for Clackamas County and convene as a Board of County Commissioners. Thank you.
All right, you're now as the Board of County Commissioners. These are also requests for consent agenda. First up, Finance. Approval, item 1, approval to accept allocated funding from the U.S. Department of the Treasury for the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund. Amount allocated is $987,225.68. Funding is through federal ARPA allocations. No county general funds are involved. Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners and Administrator Schmidt. I'm Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director. And yes, before you is a direct grant from the U.S. Treasury, and it's $1 million approximately over 2 years, and it's general revenue enhancements, and it's available for us to use as funds similar to the ways in which they are other funds generated from our local services. So this is a request for you to authorize me to accept these funds via electronically.
Oh, thank you for that. Is it prescribed how these funds are to be used?
No, it's up to you and the administrator to determine how to use these
We'll bring
funds.
this back. We can spend it any way you want, so we'll bring it back to you as part of your ARPA discussion, how you'd like to spend these dollars.
So there's an additional almost $1 million used for tribal assistance.
It's not for tribal assistance, it's for any purpose you choose to spend it for.
Oh, I was confused. It said,
Yeah.
and I'm reading through the documents on the secondary. Okay, fine. Other questions or comments? Seeing none.
I'm just curious where you saw, Chair Smith, about tribal. It says tribal consistency. So what exactly does that mean?
Local assistance and tribal consistency fund. Yes, yeah, it's mentioned twice.
Yeah,
Which is fine. That's why I'm asking, does it have a designated route to it?
It does not have a designation for use. And the funding, I believe, Chris from PGA, he mentioned that they came about a year ago, that these funds were going to eventually be available. And I think they're from some federal lands. And so they are available to both local governments and to tribals. And so that's why you're seeing the tribal title, is because it applies to both entity organizations.
So are the tribes also getting their ARPA funds?
That is correct.
Okay, that's why it says that, because
Yeah.
it was confusing to me. I'd never seen anything like this before, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But we can use it as we use other general funds.
Got it. Other questions from commissioners? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Juvenile Department. Item 1, approval of an amendment modifying terms of an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Human Services for the provision of the county's participation in the United States Department of Health and Human Services Title 4E reimbursement program. The amendment has no fiscal impact. The total agreement value remains at $400,000. No county general funds are involved. Christina McMahon's the Juvenile Director. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. Christina McMahon with the Juvenile Department. I am just here to ask you to approve this amendment to an IGA that we put into place last spring when I was before the board. It is really just, as Gary said, it's related to administrative fees. When they did the new IGA format, they forgot to take out some old language, which was they would charge us, they would hold back 3% of the administrative reimbursement that we were receiving in year one of the original agreement. And now, after that, it was 1%. Every year they hold back from our claims. And so now they're just clarifying that it is just the 1% across the board. They're not doing the 3% anymore. So there is no impact. It just is making it very clear that we get to keep most of the money.
Okay, good. Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Transportation and Development. Item 1, approval of a board order vacating a right-of-way for an unused portion of County Road Number 1769, known as 98th Avenue. Vacation fee is $2,866.51. Funding is through the petitioner. No county general funds are involved. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners, Administrator Schmidt. We're here to have a discussion. Add this item to request for consent. It's a vacation of 98th Avenue. The subject portion of right-of-way has been minimally improved, as you can see in the report. Utility and drainage corridors, that's it. There's no road there. Essentially, there was a petition filed under ORS 368341, and the appropriate fee was filed. Acknowledgement of 100% of the owners abutting the property had signed the request. After considering traffic impacts, fiscal impacts, social impacts, staff believes it would be in the best public's interest to approve the order vacating this portion of 98th. I want to affirm for the board, because there are improvements, drainage, et cetera, we are retaining access to those improvements through easements. So this just vacates the public's portion for the road right away.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 2, approval of a board order vacating a portion of Hood Avenue, a local access road. Vacation fee is $1,301.92. Funding is through the petitioner. No county general funds are involved.
Back in 1910, if you can hearken back to that time, this non-maintained local access road was dedicated to the public. It was dedicated through a plat, contains a small gravel road, dead ends at a small ravine. There's a lot of details in the report. Essentially, it's about 3,000 square feet we're looking to vacate. Again, as with the previous request, 100% of the abutting property owners submitted a request, a petition to vacate this. Our staff has reviewed it, and as with the last recommendation, is recommending approval of the vacation, but retention of the rights for any utilities or anything that may need to be located in that area. So, be happy to answer any question the board may have.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 3, approval of a resolution declaring the public necessity and purpose for acquisition of right-of-way easements and fee property, and authorizing good faith negotiations and condemnation actions for the Johnson Creek Tributary Hideaway Court Culvert Replacement Project. Right-of-way budget is $15,000. Total project budget is $911,950. Funding is through the Damascus Road Fund. No county general funds are involved.
This is not your first declaration. Essentially, as you all know, when we start a project, approval of this declaration allows our staff to go out and start good faith negotiations with property owners. Obviously, if there is any condemnation action going forward, we would bring that and vet it to the Board of County Commissioners before any action took place.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 4, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation for right-of-way services for the Courtney Avenue Complete Street, River Road, Oregon 99E project. Agreement value not to exceed $10,000. Total project value is $5,661,421. Funding through the Federal Regional Flexible Funds Allocation Grant and county road funds. No county general funds are involved.
Essentially, Clackamas County obtained regional flex funds allocation grant from Metro to construct improvements to Courtney Avenue from River Road to OR 99E. Long story short, this intergovernmental agreement for right-of-way services between Clackamas County and ODOT defines the roles and responsibilities of both parties related to right-of-way for the project. As the project uses federal funds, therefore it requires ODOT to certify the right-of-way. Essentially, this IGA has a limit of the $10,000 the administrator noted to it. Basically, just payment for their services.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
I
Yeah,
do,
Paul.
I do. So, Dan, just real quick, is this, I see ODOT here, so am I wrong to assume that this is closer to McLaughlin on Courtney than it is River Road on Courtney?
I don't have the exact project description, but I can find that out for you. But essentially, I think the ODOT reference is more in relationship to the fact that funds are federal. That's the nuance, but I can find out exactly where the project's located and let you know.
Okay, I'm just wondering if I'm reading this correctly then, that the total right-of-way acquisition is up to $10,000 for that entire stretch. That sounds pretty reasonable if that's the case.
That's not correct.
Okay,
So the IGA is for services up to $10,000. I can find out the exact right-of-way budget for you.
okay,
Yep.
all right, thank you.
Seeing no objections.
Item 5, approval of a board order authorizing purchase of 9 2022 Dodge Pursuit all-wheel drive Durangos from Withnell Dodge through the State of Oregon Cooperative Contract Number 1651. Total purchase order value is $343,705.05. Funding is through the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office budgeted county general funds.
Fleet has the pleasure of working with our partners over at Clackamas County Sheriff's Office, and they have made a request to purchase the vehicles that were described here a moment ago by the county administrator. Basically, these are purchased through a State of Oregon contract, number 1651. Notice of intent to purchase these vehicles was issued on September 1st, 2022. No comments were received. As such, staff would make the recommendation to advance.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 6, approval of a board order authorizing purchase of 5 2022 Ram Tradesman 2500 Crew Cab 4x4 trucks from Withnell Dodge through the State of Oregon Cooperative Agreement Contract Number 1651. Total purchase order value is $157,407.05. Funding through Clackamas County Sheriff's Office budgeted county general funds.
5 cents, that just interests me, it caught my attention. But essentially, as with the last request, these funds are budgeted in the CCSO's budget for this fiscal year. They've made a request from Fleet for the acquisition of these vehicles. They are done through the cooperative contract that county administrators discussed. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions or comments? Any objections? Seeing none.
Item 7, approval of a board order authorizing the purchase of 27 2023 Dodge Pursuit all-wheel drive Durangos from Withnell Dodge through the State of Oregon Cooperative Agreement Contract Number 1651. Total purchase order value is $1,142,447.76. Funding is through the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office budgeted county general funds.
So I just drawing your attention to the purpose of the acquisition for the memorandum, and it's in the packet that you received. We received information from CCSO that these, basically these vehicles are replacement for, I believe, their patrol division. So they are within the current funds budgeted to CCSO for this fiscal year. It is a sizable acquisition, and as you're looking at the person who has to go down there and sign for all these, I'm assuming my hand's going to cramp signing for 27 vehicles, but it is a large purchase for replacement vehicles for CCSO. So based off the same contract that was there previously.
Yeah, so I did a little quick math. On number 5, those Dodge Pursuit all-wheel drive Durangos come in at a cost of $38,000 each. And then on number 7, we have 27 Dodge Durangos that come in at a sticker price of $42,000 each, and there's some people shaking their heads in the back. I want to know what the difference is. Would you like to, can you
I
explain?
would love to ask one of my.
That's just my quick math,
Explanation for
and
that?
you can adjust my math if it's not correct.
And Chair,
Go
may I
ahead.
add, why are you purchasing some of the calendar year 2022 models and others 2023 models? Why?
Okay, so Warren Gedberry, Fleet Manager. So right now, the supply situation has been really constrained. So the 9 existing vehicles of 2022s are actually on the lot. We're going to actually take possession of those right out the gate. So they're this current model year, so they're a little bit cheaper. The 2023s, we are actually placing an order with the vendor, and we'll be receiving those at a later date, so.
Good. So are the additional 27, is that price guaranteed?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Are they equipped the same?
Yeah, they're basically just a newer model year.
So they just went up $4,000 over 1 year?
They did, yeah, we've been
Wee-haw.
experiencing a lot of that, yes.
We have a couple commissioners in the queue. Commissioner Scholl?
Yes. Okay, for the last 3 items here, total of 41 vehicles. What's the plan for disposal? Are you going to dispose of 41 old vehicles? How are you going to do that? And upon disposal, sell, auction, where do the proceeds go? Do they go back to the general fund? Do they go back to the sheriff's
They
fund?
go-
Can you tell me about that?
Sure, yeah, basically, so some of the the last batch, the rear batch, the 20-some vehicles, those are going to be replacements and some additional vehicles for the sheriff's levy. So, but when we get vehicles, as we bring them in, we're always looking at, assessing the current vehicles and then rolling off vehicles that have, problems or whatever, the older vehicles.
Speaking to the mic, please.
Sorry. So then we will basically run those through the auction generally. So, and then the proceeds from the auctions get posted back into the sheriff's office. There's an auction proceeds revenue line that gets posted back
Okay.
into there.
Okay, and then now the 38,000 or whatever it is on these vehicles, you're gonna need more money too for upgrades, lights, sirens, and that. How does that work?
So we approached the board last, I believe it was in June, for a little bit over $600,000 worth of equipment. So lights, cages, push bumpers, all those things. So we've already basically acquired the pieces for it.
Okay.
And then we're finalizing a setup contract right now. It averages around $5,000 per vehicle for the vendor to actually put those pieces and the car all together and end up with a fully equipped patrol car.
But you know how much it costs to equip each vehicle. That's what the question was.
So all total, I believe it's around just under $30,000 per vehicle.
So another $30,000 to equip each vehicle. Commissioner Shaw, you done?
Okay, well, that answers my question, thank you.
But the used vehicle or the auction fund that this money goes into to sell the used vehicles, then what happens to that fund? What is that fund used for?
It's just offsetting revenues back into the sheriff's fund.
Do you
So
know, Dan?
Fleet works proactively. We've actually had, we've advanced our efforts in this area with liquidation of used vehicles. And essentially, we're in a partnership with finance and others. We're using OpenGov through that?
We're using
Gov Deals.
Gov Deals.
Gov Deals, to basically advertise and get those used vehicles back out of our supply chain if they have no additional value. And then they're facilitated in discussions with fleet, they're facilitated in discussion with whoever owns the vehicle, and obviously finance, and then when those are put up for auction, those dollars then go back to the department in which they owned the asset to begin with.
Okay, so, but my question is, Gary, shouldn't like funds go to like funds, not a slush fund for the sheriff department? Shouldn't this used vehicle fund go back in, for instance, to pay for lights and computers and all the goodies, the additional $30,000 per vehicle? And I don't know whether it does or not.
Yes, it should.
So I think we need to check on that,
Yes,
since
I
nobody
will.
seems to know the answer on that. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so my question here, I'm going to assume that the Durangos are going to replace the Chargers. So that's going to be a phase out. So is that, the Chargers are being phased out, right? Is that correct?
Yeah,
So you
effectively.
really don't have
yeah,
a choice. Yeah, so with that in mind, how much more are they than the Chargers were, or is this on par?
They're close. They're a little bit more. I apologize. I don't have the specifics for the latest model Charger amounts, but they're not extremely higher than the actual Chargers were. So,
Well, I'd like to see how they hold up after a while, a couple of years from now, see how they're
Yeah.
mechanically holding up.
yeah.
Thank you.
Do you think they're not as good?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. There's always, every model year, there's some idiosyncrasies that sometimes occur, and the Chargers had some challenges here and there.
Okay, good. Any other questions or comments? See no objections, but we do need to answer my question on that. Thank you, Gary.
All right, item 8, approval of a contract with KNL Industries for the Barton Park East RV Campground paving project. Total contract value is $174,718. Funding is through an Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, County Opportunity Grant, allocated county ARPA funds, and County Parks Fiscal Year 23 Capital Improvement Project funds. No county general funds are involved.
This is basically a contract to do a 2-inch overlay for the Barton Park East RV Campground. There's some details that provide some background into when it was constructed in 2002 and some budget shortfalls, which required them to go from a 4-inch overlay to a 2-inch. Essentially, this project was advertised in accordance with ORS and LCRB rules on September 8th, 2022. Bids were open on September 29th, 2022. After review of the bids, KNL Industries was determined to be the lowest responsive bidder. With that, staff would be happy to answer your questions. The board did hear this previously with approval of the Opportunity Grant Agreement, so the board is aware of it.
Well, that would be very nice for Barton Park. Any questions or comments? Seeing no objections for this moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Dan.
Next, Health, Housing, Human Services. Item 1, approval of an amendment increasing funding and reallocating budgeted funds through a subrecipient grant agreement with the Cascade AIDS Project for HIV testing and counseling services. The amendment value is $3,500. Total grant value is now $78,500 for 1 year. The amendment funding is through the Oregon Health Authority. No county general funds are involved. Adam Brown is back, Deputy Director of Health, Housing, Human Services.
Hello again, Adam Brown, Deputy Director, Health, Housing, and Human Services. So this amendment adds $3,500 of funding from the Oregon Health Authority for media outreach for monkeypox distributed through push notifications on social media platforms. The notifications, which are being coordinated with our Tri-County public health partners, include general health information about monkeypox, preventative measures, treatment, and where to find related resources. The messages also direct people to vaccination opportunities within the Tri-Counties and how to access those opportunities.
Excuse me. Questions or comments for the presenter? Seeing no objections.
Item 2, approval of a federal grant award from the U.S. Department of Justice for the Improving Reentry Education and Employment Outcomes Grant for individuals leaving incarceration, and a board order authorizing the Division Director of Children, Family, and Community Corrections to accept the award. Grant value is $900,000 for 3 years. Funding is through the U.S. Department of Justice. No county general funds are involved.
So approval of this grant award will allow for the restoration and expansion of the Second Chance Employment Program that ended 2 years ago due to funding reductions. As with the previous programming, CFCC will partner with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office to provide employment services, including career planning, job search training, career technical education, and intensive case management to individuals leaving incarceration. Engagement with participants starts prior to their release, and priority is given to BIPOC participants and those with children in the home. The program will serve an estimated 60 people each year and is expected to reduce one-year rearrest rates.
Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, are you doing this in a collaboration with Clackamas Workforce Partnership out of curiosity, or is it just a county?
So all of the workforce programming is coordinated by system partners. This program funds FTE at CFCC. So I'd have to talk with the division and learn about what connections there are with workforce. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scholl?
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Brown, your documentation for this $900,000 for 3 years shows is for a 1.5 FTE, or is that a 1.5 FTE added to the current FTEs? And is this going to be billed out by the hour?
So I can get you a full breakdown of the program budget, what the $300,000 is spent annually. Generally, these program budgets include, not only the positions, right, but also funding for, flexible client assistance funds, the education and training opportunities that folks need, and the full suite of benefits that we make available to program participants.
I see. Okay, because the background documentation made it look to me like the $900,000 was for just the FTEs. Okay.
Yeah, I'll get you the full program budget.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Seeing no objections?
Item 3, approval of a revenue agreement from CARE Oregon for the dental program Meaningful Language Access Payment Incentive Program to fund language interpretive services at Clackamas Health Centers. Projected revenue is $85,000 for 15 months. Funding is through CARE Oregon. No county general funds are involved.
So this revenue agreement will fund an increased level of interpretation services for Health Center's dental program CARE Oregon members that have limited English proficiency or those that are hearing impaired. The goal of this program is to increase the number and rate of interpretation for visits requiring those services, including teledentistry visits, which will improve overall quality of dental health for our patients.
Very nice. Any questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 4, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Clackamas Community College to provide transportation services for students. The agreement value is $315,505.34 for 2 years. Funding is through House Bill 2017 Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund Regional Coordination Program. No county general funds are involved.
The funding in this agreement, administered by the Social Services Division, will allow Clackamas Community College to expand the free CCC Express Shuttle service to provide evening service and service during the summer term. The shuttle will continue to be open to the public and provide a direct link between Oregon City and Clackamas. This supports student transportation in areas with a high percentage of low-income housing. It improves 4 last-mile connections within the TriMet district and provides faster service than TriMet between Clackamas Town Center and CCC's Oregon City campus and between the Oregon City campus and the Harmony campus.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 5, approval of an amendment increasing funding and extending the duration of the subrecipient agreement with Northwest Family Services for homeless shelter services and rent assistance. The amendment value is $250,000 for 12 months. The agreement value is now $1,107,500 for 30 months. No county general funds are involved.
The amendment adds unspent balances of one-time COVID-19 Emergency Solutions Grant funds for shelter services and rent assistance. It also extends the term of the agreement so that we can continue providing these essential services through the spend-down date of these funds, which is June 30th, 2023.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, similar to my last question, Adam, when you were up, as far as the transition for when these funds run out, will there be opportunities to help these folks transition into self-sustainability so they can maintain, or what bridge funding is there when these funds cease?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I was actually thinking about this last night and the need to talk with our program folks. So, there was an interesting interplay between the availability of COVID-19 funds and then the passage of the Supportive Housing Services measure. So what we saw is that, the COVID-19 funds came in mid-2020, and those were one-time funds. So they're slowly being exhausted, right? A lot of it's already gone, the rent assistance funds. These funds will be exhausted by the end of this fiscal year. And so then the question is, what capacity did we build during the course of the pandemic that we want to continue on an ongoing basis with SHS funds, right? There's a logical connection there. So I'm going to be actually talking with the program team about whether or not because our providers have scaled up, right? They had to scale up, and it's hard for them to do on a one-time basis. So we should leverage that opportunity to continue this established programming with SHS funds. It sort of is a shorter line from point A to point B. So that's definitely a relevant question.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious as to this and the next couple agenda items are funded similarly. So I'm just kind of curious as to how many people altogether that affects, and then going forward after the funds expire, if that becomes maybe, I won't say a burden, but other funding will be, like you just said, will need to be filled. I'm just thinking that if some of these folks can use this opportunity to gear up, whatnot, to better jobs and so forth, they can sustain themselves. So I don't know if there's a transition plan in mind. That's where I'm getting at. You don't need to answer it, but that's what my interest is, because I'm just worried about the funds being dried up, frankly. Not just these funds, but future funds.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Scholl?
Mr. Brown, it seems to me we have many grants coming through for Northwest Family Services. They must be very busy. This might be a point of curiosity, but how many current contracts do we have with Northwest Family Services? Just give me a call on that.
Will
Okay.
do. And this is something also that I was thinking about, so that one of the benefits of consolidating all of our housing and homeless services funding under the purview of the new Housing and Community Development Division, one of the benefits of that is consolidation of this funding into a smaller number of contracts, right? So ideally, we would have one contract with an agency to the extent that it fits within these program categories, and we're braiding that funding within a single contract, so it reduces the administrative burden both for our providers and for us. So that's something we'll be working on over time.
Okay, but you still have the same audit requirement for sub-recipient agreements with Northwest Family Services, correct? You're still going to be tracking on that?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, subrecipient monitoring, some of it is a function of our funding source, right? What's required of the funding source, and some of it is based on county standards, but of course, subrecipient monitoring is always part of our agreements with service providers.
Okay, thank you.
Questions or comments? Seeing none.
Item 6, approval of an amendment increasing funding and extending the duration of the subrecipient agreement with Clackamas Women's Services for homeless shelter services and rent assistance. The amendment value is $250,000 for 12 months. The total agreement value is now $702,500 for 30 months. No county general funds are involved.
So again, very similar to the last one, the amendment adds unspent balances of one-time COVID-19 Emergency Solutions Grant funds and extends the term so that we can continue providing essential shelter services and rent assistance.
Questions or comments? Any objections? Seeing none.
Item 7, approval of an amendment increasing funding to the cooperation agreement with Clackamas Volunteers in Medicine for construction expenses at the Clackamas Community College Health Center. The amendment value is $300,000. The total agreement value is now $950,000. Funding is through federal community development block grant funds. No county general funds are involved.
So this amendment utilizes a combination of unallocated CDBG CV funds and unspent prior year balances of regular CDBG funds to increase funding for the construction of the Clackamas Community College Health Center. This funding will cover increased construction costs due to the labor shortages, supply chain issues, and demand within the construction sector.
Yeah, so the prices went up, and this group has already raised $2.7 million. Has this group been able to secure a contractor?
I'll connect with the community development folks to learn about that. I was getting briefed on this and learned about the issue with the prior contractor, and that's some of the origin of this problem. And so
Yeah, they
I'll
had to
talk with them.
fire the prior contractor. Also, prices went up $475,000, but they were able to get those, they had another supplement to another $175,000 supplement from another organization, and so the request here is only $300,000.
Yeah, my understanding is that, we were committing to fund about 65% of the original project proposal with that $650,000. Now the total price of the contract has increased substantially, and we're sort of meeting them in the middle, or not quite the middle, in terms of adding this additional funding, but they're still they're still closing the gap there with their private funds, just like they were going to.
It says here, now I find the language, Adam. Clackamas County Community Development Division have additional funds being held in reserves for COVID relief-related capital projects like ours. This is from Martha Spears, the project manager and executive director of the clinic. Yes, Commissioner Scholl?
I think that answered my question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioners. Any objections to this moving forward? Seeing none.
Item 8, approval of an assignment addendum from the Housing Authority of Clackamas County for a personal services contract with Clackamas Service Center for outreach and engagement services. The addendum has no fiscal impact. Contract value remains at $186,500 for 8 months. Funding is through Metro Supportive Housing Services Fund. No county general funds are involved.
So this item corresponds to the first two contracts that you heard as the Housing Authority Board, and this affects that assignment to the county. And the next item is exactly the same.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
Item 9, approval of an assignment addendum from the Housing Authority of Clackamas County for a personal services contract with Northwest Housing Alternatives for emergency shelter services. Addendum has no fiscal impact. Contract value is $560,000 for 8 months. Funding is through Metro Supportive Housing Services Fund. No county general funds are involved.
So as I said before, this corresponds to a previously heard item and assigns the contract to the county.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Scholl.
Mr. Brown, what facilities are being used with this money to provide emergency shelter?
So this Northwest Housing Alternatives uses motel vouchers to shelter folks and to provide transitional housing opportunities for these program participants, these families.
So some of those would go to Econo Lodge, Clackamas Inn, Comfort Suites, and others, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll asterisk on that, not the Econo Lodge, right? Because the county is master leasing that property for a specific programmatic purpose. So it would be other motels.
I understood. Okay.
Questions or comments? See no objections.
All right, if we can go back to item 7 on the Clackamas Volunteers in Medicine. I see Mark Soroya is here from Community Development. Did you want to answer the question of the board? Is that why you're here? Come on up, please.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Mark Soroy. I'm with the Community Development Division, or Housing and Community Development Division. Commissioners, so your question was about whether or not a contractor was bid the project. So yes, GSI contractors did bid the project. They're the low bidder, and we'll be bringing that contract to you next week or the following week to review and approve.
So they have not started until they
Correct.
sign the contract? Well, good, at least we have a contractor. That was a big issue. Thank you for that report, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. All right. That is all the requests for consent agenda. All of these items will go on this Thursday's business meeting agenda. Thank you. All right, Chair, will you now convene as the Water Environment Services Board?
Yes, we will recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as Water Environment Services Board.
All right, you're now meeting as Water Environment Services. This is the West Willamette Facilities Plan update. This is a discussion item only, no decisions made today. We have Greg Geis, Director of Water Environment Services, and Lynn Chicoine, Contractor for Water Environment Services. If possible, can you keep this to 30 minutes? If that's not enough time, we'll have you come back another time. Okay.
Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. Greg Geis, West Director. Today we have an informational and discussion item similar to what we did a few weeks ago with our Storm System Master Plan. But this one is for how we intend to treat the wastewater in our region for the foreseeable future. This plan essentially feeds our capital improvement plan that we're going to be taking to our advisory committee November 10th, and then back to this body on November 29th, and again on December 17th. So lots of opportunities to weigh in. This is really just the underlying basis for our planning. And with that, I'll hand it off to Lynn.
Thanks, Greg. I'm Lynn Chicoine. I'm the former capital program manager for WES, now retired, and helping them out finish some things. Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners and Administrator Schmidt.
And welcome back. You just couldn't leave, could you?
No, it doesn't look like retirement, does it? Slides? That would be helpful.
I'll run it.
Okay. This morning, we're here to present the result of a significant planning project that we at WES have been working on since 2018 with the help of our consultant Carollo Engineers and their sub-consultants. And the project is the Willamette Facilities Plan. And the purpose of the project is to develop a recommendation for improvements to WES's 2 major treatment facilities so they can continue to meet treatment and capacity requirements for the next 20 years. Of course, those 2 treatment plants are the Tri-City facility in Oregon City and the Kellogg Creek facility in Milwaukee. Both of these plants discharge treated water to the Willamette River. The recommendation from the Willamette Facilities Plan is a $119 million capital plan, approximately half of which is attributable to an expansion at Tri-City for wet weather capacity in 2040. So what is a facilities planning process in the wastewater world? I imagine it's not too different than master planning for other public utilities. But for wastewater, it's very prescribed process. The structure and certain elements are required. If WES wants to go out for SRF funding, state revolving fund funding, through the EPA and administered by DEQ for any projects that result from the facility plan. We followed those procedures, and so if WES opts to go for low-interest loans through the SRF for any of the projects that come out of this, they are able to do that. Basically, there's 3 steps to a facilities plan. First thing we do is prepare a condition and capacity assessment of an existing treatment facility. Then we define future capacity, regulatory requirements for the planning horizon, in this case 2040. Then we develop and evaluate alternatives and how to get from here to there. And from those alternatives, prepare a recommended plan along with a cost estimate and an implementation schedule. And then we also identify condition improvement projects that are going to be needed along the way. Next. What's unique about the Willamette Facilities Plan is that we looked at both Kellogg Creek and the Tri-City facilities together, not as individual facilities. We did that for 3 reasons. One, they both discharge to the Willamette River. 2, as a practical matter, that's how we operate. In wet weather, Kellogg Creek is capped at 25 million gallons a day. Anything over that goes to Tri-City. In dry weather, we operate them together too. If there's a need, either at Kellogg or Tri-City, operators send flow over to Tri-City. Then, and importantly, we wanted to know if we could better optimize the use of our existing facilities, both dry and wet season, if we considered Kellogg and Tri-City as a single system. For treatment capacity and from a regulatory perspective, today and in the future. Our ability to look at Kellogg and Tri-City as a single system is a direct result of the formation of WES as a 190 in 2016. So, wastewater world, we have 2 regulatory seasons. In the dry season, we look at the capacity of our facilities to remove or oxidize organic matter. The amount of organic matter we need to treat is directly proportional to population. But in the wet season, our concern, and that's November to April, our concern is the ability to hydraulically pass flow, not only from homes and businesses, but groundwater that gets into our system, and importantly, rainwater that gets into our pipes, either through direct connection, which is called inflow, or through cracks and defects in the pipe, and that's called infiltration. Infiltration and inflow, directly related to rainfall, is referred to as I&I. The amount of I&I we have is a function of the miles of pipe we have and the condition of the pipe. And of course, I&I peaks during storms. Next slide. Let's talk about the dry season. That's the easiest one. We measure organic load as BOD, or biochemical oxygen demand, and total suspended solids. TSS, you don't need to remember that. What you need to know are that those are the 2 things that we have to remove in our current permits at Kellogg and Tri-Cities. And that those are another way of referring to organic load, and those will increase, and we have to remove more as population increases. Next slide. So all we're required to consider in a facilities plan is a current permit limit, so BOD and TSS. That's all we looked at, and that's all the capital dollars refer to as our current permit limits. But we don't want to construct something that's going to be a stranded investment if regulations change. So a likely additional treatment requirement, likely but not imminent, is nutrient removal. That is the removal of ammonia and phosphorus from the treatment plants, from the influent flow. That requires additional treatment. So we looked at 2 different ways to do that. One is to ship more flow in the dry weather season to Tri-City and remove everything we need to remove in terms of nutrients at Tri-City and leave Kellogg the way it is. The other alternative was to remove nutrients at both Kellogg and Tri-City. That's more expensive because Kellogg is landlocked. we would need to do something called intensification. It's an expensive way to remove nutrients at Kellogg. Our recommendation is if nutrient removal appears in the permit now or sometime in the future, or not now, in the future sometime, that we remove it at Tri-City. That's going to require a shift in regulatory strategy by WES. We would work with DEQ to develop a combined permit where our load is seen as one total from Tri-City and Kellogg. Again, that's something we're able to do because of the 190. Next slide. But for today's, in our current permit, today's limits, we have very minimal work to do for dry weather capacity. Nothing on the liquid side. A small project at Tri-City to thicken primary sludge, which is not currently thickened, to extend the life of the digesters, and at Kellogg, a $4 million project to expand the thickening process on the solid side. Total $12 million, relatively small. Now we'll talk about the wet season. So, in wet weather, as I mentioned, our capacity concern turns to flow, or the amount of water coming to the facility. On this project, or on this slide, the brown color is the flow coming down the pipe in 2040, or on different design conditions from people's houses. The green is groundwater infiltration, and the blue is rainwater that gets into our pipes through I&I. The purpose of the slide is just to show you visually how much of the flow is attributable to rain. For the statistical storm that we design around, you can see how much capacity is required to move rainwater. Even with, and the slide shows, even with our ambitious I&I reduction program, we are assuming that's going to be done by WES and our partner cities. This is the amount of flow that we need to treat at Tri-City as we go into the future. And this illustrates that we can take 25 MGD, million gallons a day. We're capped at Kellogg Creek, and the rest of it is at Tri-City. That's why we're talking about Tri-City. Next. So a process-by-process wet weather capacity analysis at Tri-City shows that expansion is needed throughout the facility to accommodate the 2040 projected peak flows. The capacity of the Tri-City facility today is 70 million gallons a day, or MGD. Peak 2040 flows are projected at 105 million gallons a day. Design separately from this plan is already underway to expand the capacity of the Tri-City outfall from 75 million gallons a day to 162, which is the build-out capacity at Tri-City. Okay. And what's interesting and somewhat challenging, as this slide shows graphically, peak flows are infrequent. We only see them during our major storms, about 1 to 2% of the time, and about 1 to 3% of our flow at Tri-City will be above our 35 million gallon a day capacity of our biological system. That's a lot of money for something that doesn't happen very often, but that's what we are required to treat. And it's challenging for a biological system like a treatment facility to ramp up and treat those peak flows, because microorganisms are slow to change, and these peak flows come through the plant and last for hours, maybe a day. So that's our challenge. And so our recommended plan is that we expand Tri-City to increase its wet weather capacity from 70 to 105 MGD for the 2040 peak flow, using an enhanced primary treatment process, also called ballasted sedimentation. It's not a biological process. It's a process that's designed for this type of situation, for peak flows. It can be brought online quickly to react to storms. They've got a similar system in Salem. They have a similar system in Washington and around the country. The process will treat flow in excess of our biological capacity, and then when combined with effluent from the biological system, we'll meet our effluent permit limit. Capital cost for the system is about $54 million. And I'll just add quickly that an advantage of the system is that it can also be used for nutrient removal in the dry weather season. So it can do double duty for us. Next slide. The recommended 2040 site layout for these facilities, its process then is the blue shown on this site plan. Next. And further, the process we're recommending can be incorporated into the Tri-City plant at build-out with or without nutrient removal and regardless of our permitting approach with respect to nutrient removal. Next steps, summary, Willamette Facilities Plan recommends a $119 million expansion or amount of work at Kellogg and Tri-City for capacity and condition improvements. The largest project is a wet weather expansion at Tri-City, estimated cost of $54 million. We have worked with DEQ since the beginning of the project. They are up to speed with what we're proposing. The next step is to negotiate with DEQ so that they know, so that we have some comfort that they approve our path forward. And I think that'll be done in conjunction with permit negotiations. We're planning to begin design of the facility, the Tri-City expansion in 2026, and be done with construction in 2031. We presented this to the West Advisory Committee earlier this year, and they have endorsed our plan. I am happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we have a couple commissioners in the queue. I'm not sure who is first.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Mark, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. I always find it fascinating to hear about the West projects. A few months ago, I believe Mr. Geis briefed us and said that in high water, high rainfall periods, you can experience up to a 15 times greater flow into the plant as during dry weather or something like that.
10 to 11-ish.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And maybe it was the city of Milwaukee that Mayor Gamba last week said he had a 15 times in wet weather as in dry weather due to I&I. My question is this. I know you have plans to mitigate I&I in your 360 miles of pipes. Okay, so when you look at what you're doing to mitigate that I&I inflow and what it will cost compared to the cost of your capital improvements, how do you balance that out? In other words, if you think that you're going to be successful in reducing I&I by some percent.
65% in 19 basins.
What was that? Could you speak louder?
65% in 19 basins.
Okay, 65% in 19 basins, but that's rainwater inflow, right? Not groundwater intrusion, correct?
Yeah.
The reason I'm being pesky here this morning is because I'm trying to understand when you look at your process, your projects to reduce I&I by some amount, how does that affect your future requirements for plant expansion and the capital dollar expenditures? In other words, let me reword it. Do you go ahead and plan for your plant expansion with assuming that there's no I&I reduction in the future? How do you balance that out?
I'll take a crack at it. And
Go ahead.
Lynn can correct me. So when I wanted to say, we own and operate 360 miles of pipe, approximately. But there's probably more than double that actually comes to our facility. So the cities of Oregon City, West Linn, Gladstone, Milwaukee, they have many, hundreds of more. And that's why we have the I&I agreement with them, because we don't own or operate. We need to encourage them to fix those problems. The way the analysis, my understanding, worked is, yes, we could project what flows we would have in the future if we didn't do anything with I&I, and what we would have to build in that case. And we said, that's astronomical. We don't want to do that. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. So we're going to assume that we can reduce that I&I by working in our own system and with the cities by a certain amount, and then, okay, what would we need to build to treat that peak flow? And that's what we're talking about today.
Right,
And the
okay.
delta between those two was approximately $100 million over the next 20 years,
120.
120.
And we did look at that. We did a sanitary sewer master plan and determined that it was more cost-effective to remove the I&I. It's hard to chase water. So you only do it where it's likely very cost-effective to do it.
Got it,
You don't
yeah,
do it throughout. And cost-effective means, what is the capacity downstream? What do you not have to, in terms of pipes, what do you not have to enlarge? There's a lot that goes into it. Anyway, and I happened to look at the numbers because I thought a question like this might come up. If we were to not remove I&I, the project we would be looking to build at Tri-City, instead of 105 MGD, would be 172 MGD.
Okay, so that helps me. That helps me. One last question, and I don't mean to be a pest here, but, okay, so we have population growth, we have I&I issues, you have a permitting process with the state. Is there a number in terms of inflow and outflow that the state says is your absolute maximum discharge for your current West projects?
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
And the reason I ask that question is that I want to know that, because is there a maximum, okay? And if there is, would that drive the need for yet more plant capacity in another location?
That's a good question. They don't, if it's clean water, they don't regulate that. But
Right.
there is a cap, it's called a mass load limit
Yeah.
during wet weather, that they don't want BOD and TSS, organic load, there's a limit on what you can put in the river. And part of the negotiations that Wes will be doing with DEQ is to get that limit raised.
Okay.
And we don't just ask them. We have done a lot of modeling to show that if you raise it to what we need, it does not affect water quality.
All right, well, thank you very much for the information.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Scholl's interest in this topic. Just to add on to what he said, and I'll get back to my questions, but we still have the political or difficult dynamic of encouraging the cities and hoping the cities, for example, will actually partake in the steps and the expense of reducing their I&I flow. So we're putting a lot of, hope? Is that the strategy? Or do we have something more firm that can assure that the investments we're making are not stranded, and we should have maybe made the larger investment? So that's one concern I've got of many. But can you just touch on that? Because hope is not a good strategy.
Right, and it's a carrot or a stick. We chose to do the carrot. I will say, we looked, at the capital plans for the various cities that we serve, and looked at what I&I projects they had on the books, and felt that we could fully fund those and that they were meaningful. I think we're set for about $5 million this year in support, so it is making an impact. We will have to track it year over year, and we will continue to do that, and if it becomes evident that it's not effective or it's not going to be enough, then we'll have to have a different conversation.
Well, yeah, I'd just be concerned that we go all the way to that point, we push the button on the expansion for the hope strategy, and then it doesn't come along, and then we're saying, oh, geez, we should have made it bigger, we should have done this, and again, we're at a loss. And that's something I'm very worried about, because I'm
Yeah.
not sure we've seen much movement with our partners in their collection systems for tightening those up.
All the partner cities have done I&I studies. They're all working on it. We're assisting Gladstone and Oregon City with projects that are underway. But remember that I&I isn't just about treatment. It's about the downstream pipes. And those are in the cities. They can't not fix their pipes. We identified where the most cost-effective work is to be done. It agreed in all cases with where they saw they needed to do work. So it's in their interest, too, to get this work done.
Okay.
And just a little bit reassuring, I mean, we're talking out to 2040 building capacity. And so I think it's pretty safe to say that we've got some time at this point to evaluate. And if we need to go a different direction on I&I, there is time before 2040, certainly, to go with a different approach.
Yeah, well, I've been part of the last 25 in watching this and somewhat discussing this very issue for the last 25 years, right? Wearing one hat or another, and the concern about that, especially when it comes to the Tri-Cities part of the system. So getting back to where I really wanted to start was, I think it was slide 1 or slide 2, your very first one, you showed a plant there, a couple diagrams, before and after, and it shows an expansion, it looks like. Can you possibly bring that slide back up? I can maybe start there, because what I'm seeing here is, maybe bring me up to speed. So my last recollection was we did a lot of work on solids and the digester work at Kellogg, and we offloaded that and trucked it for a long, long time, the Tri-Cities. And I'm seeing similar needs in there for the digester again at Kellogg. So what do we do, or are we? Bring me up to speed. Was that not successful?
We are still trucking biosolids from Kellogg to the Tri-City campus. You will see it in our capital improvement plan, where we will upgrade the Kellogg facility to do that, to make what we call cake out of that liquid that we currently haul.
Right, the centrifuge?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So these two diagrams right here, I mean, is that one of our facilities, or is that just a model, just a generic one?
It might be, but it's just generic, and as far as I'm concerned.
There is a slide that I'll go to that I think, it's not working.
Okay, so my recollection also, Greg, was that the dry weather flow at Kellogg was pretty well at its max, right? It was a plant that was designed to have a mere, a doubling of size if needed. And, when I read, full disclosure, only read about 240 pages of the 617. So I didn't make it all the way through. But what I did glean out of that was that the projections for the Kellogg plant show a substantial amount of the growth being absorbed there, dry weather. We're talking dry weather right now. So how? Are we talking expanding Kellogg to meet that, or?
No.
Or we're just going to bypass that? I mean, how are you going to get, if it's the treatment for the nutrients, are we just going to pump that to Tri-Cities from Kellogg?
Yes, from the intertie before it gets to Kellogg.
Okay, the one on the east.
Yeah.
The east intertie. All right. So there's no. What would not bother me, what confused me, when I saw the projections for the growth at the two plants, was knowing we were already maxed out at Kellogg, how can we absorb that growth? Put aside the nutrient issue, just solids or, the primary treatment, whatever it may be. What was that telling us?
We have capacity with the current permit at Kellogg to absorb growth. Now, I think there's probably some shunting of flow over to Tri-Cities to be able to do that, but I don't have the numbers off the top of my head.
Okay. Maybe time for a different time to have a more deeper discussion, but I'm just curious, because it seemed to be a basis for your conclusions, was that Kellogg would absorb some of that growth. I don't see how, because we already know it's overcapacity on wet weather already, right? it floods the facility when that happens. And I know you guys doing your best to divert to Tri-Cities, but you're short on dry and you're short on wet weather capacity. So I just didn't know if that was in the cards.
Yeah, we aren't short on dry weather capacity.
Pardon?
We aren't short on dry weather capacity.
Okay, I thought we were in one of the two, whether it was solids or whatnot, but no.
We have to expand a thickening process at Kellogg, but that's it.
All right. Now, my last question, I think, for today, that is that I saw the expenses and all that, but I didn't get to all the pages. So is there a rate impact for this?
This is incorporated in our capital plan, our capital improvement plan that we're going to present after Thanksgiving to you. And so this is part of that. And we'll be talking about rates at that time.
And that CIP presentation that we're giving both to our advisory committee and this board includes both what we need to build and how we're going to pay for it. And I've been talking for months now about a 5-year or a 5% year-over-year rate increase to fund all of this. It's up to you folks to decide, do we want to partially fund it? But that's what we're looking at. So that's what's coming.
Right, and I was sharing with my colleagues recently that, our growth projections, this argument about how much SDCs you collect, the recovery of SDCs versus how much is borne by the ratepayers and the advantages to the ratepayers if the growth can actually help contribute to that because everyone's sharing in the cost.
Mm-hmm.
So there was something there that impeded our ability for the growth, and the growth really didn't come. You're going to be short on SDCs, shorter than projected, and shorter on that shared rate collection if suddenly lands are plucked out of Wes's service area or potential for the future, 2040, 2050.
Yeah.
So my concern about that is really how that impacts the existing base and the rates and that economic analysis. If 500 acres is pulled out of Clackamas County every 2 years in that area that we plan on serving, and that's part of our growth projections and to pay for the rates, that would concern me. And I don't know if the economics is, I don't know if they're sure that's your bailiwick or not, but.
It's not. We rely on Eco Northwest and Portland State University to do those population forecasting. We do it every few years. I think we're going to do it again this year. And, year over year, there can be variation, but over the long haul, they tend to be fairly accurate. Some years are less, we'll see what happens this year, right?
Yeah, they're pretty good about it, but it's predicted based on our territory and our lands that are in the UGB to do that. And if that changes, that's something that they didn't anticipate. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So I'm interested in how you do project growth. So you say that Eco Northwest does an analysis every few years, and then that could potentially amend what is needed for growth and in order to build the capacity necessary?
Yeah.
Okay, so this plan right here doesn't anticipate development occurring on the far reaches of the urban growth boundary, say at the edges of Damascus or the areas, you might not be following this land swap issue with Metro, but there's a concern that 500 acres being removed from the urban growth boundary so that Tiger can develop 500 acres of housing.
So we follow the cities, and, Happy Valley does their Pleasant Valley Carver comprehensive plan that goes out to 192nd-ish and down to Carver and up to the county line. And that's what we know is going to happen. Anything outside of that is pure speculation.
Okay, so your planning is based on the development that is happening now and the SDCs that we're receiving and what is certain, not what could happen.
Yes.
20 years from now. Or,
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments for the presenters on this? Gary?
All right, so this is just an informational update. They'll be back to you before the end of the year for your action. Thank you, Greg and Lynn.
Thank you.
All right, Chair, would you please reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners?
I will recess as the Water Environment Services and convene as the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay.
And can you roll this up, Tony? I
So
think
next,
it's making some of us cough.
it's new and it has the new screen smell to it. All right, the next item is Metro UGB Exchange Update, continued discussion. Dan Johnson and Jamie Stasny from Transportation and Development. There's a memo in your packet. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you. We are here again. We had the pleasure of updating the board on October 25th regarding the COO's recommendation on a proposed urban growth boundary swap. That recommendation is a part of the packet of materials you have before you today. It's attachment 2, I believe. And at the conclusion of that October 25th meeting, you directed staff to keep all options open, which we are doing. And also, we had proposed to come back to you with a recommended letter to submit for public comment on the board's behalf. And that recommended letter is included as attachment number 1 in your packet as well. I want to highlight just a couple of things. One, you'll also notice on page 2 of the staff report, it talks about the schedule, Metro schedule going forward. So there will be a number of times to comment in various forums regarding Metro's proposal. I want to highlight kind of 5 key components that are in this proposed letter. One is a request to stay this UGB swap discussion until additional information is provided through other analysis going underway by the Port of Portland. There's discussion around resources to support development for lands currently in the UGB. There's discussion around funding and identifying key employment areas in Clackamas County. And there's a discussion around commitments to key infrastructure needed to support those areas. I also want to emphasize the fact the letter itself, though it's not identified in the memo, there are a focus on the fact this not be precedent moving forward, and there be more of a regional discussion around how lands are brought in and developed within the urban growth boundary dialogue in partnership with Metro. You'll see the letter, again, attachment A, and we are here, although I'm assuming there will be a variety of discussions held today. The primary purpose today from staff, we are looking for direction on the board. If you have any suggested edits to the letter, please let us know. I do want to go back, and there's a couple things I want to clarify from the October 25th presentation. And these were sent to you in an email. Just want to make sure we get these on the record. There were discussions around the legal authority to do this, which we identified in OAR 660-024-0070 is where the authority is granted, although it's never been used in the metro region. There was discussion around public outreach, which there was discussion around Damascus CPO presentations and then information within that email to you that identified all the outreach they'd done to date, also jurisdictional presentations. There was a question around the Oregon City opinion, as identified in page 8 of the COO recommendation. The Oregon City Commission had indicated they didn't oppose to the proposal. That was in option 3 of the 3 that came out of the COO recommendation. There were questions around Tiger's proposal, River Terrace 2.0, and I provided a link to the board. If they had information or questions regarding that, they could identify it there. The proposal identifies the fact that they are looking at the possibility of 3,000 to 4,500 housing units in that area. There were discussions around delays, around delaying this mid-cycle review to the full cycle review. So there's some data in that email then about what those delays might mean for the ability to develop those areas. And most importantly, I want to correct on the record the response I gave to Commissioner Fisher, which was incorrect. And that dealt with applicability of taxation and its correlation to the UGB boundary versus Metro's taxing district boundary. The UGB has no correlation to that taxing authority. It's Metro's district boundary which does. So with that, we are here to answer any questions the board may have and get concurrence on any proposed edits the board might like to see to the letter and submit it on your behalf.
Thank you, Dan, for that. I do have an addition to the letter, which I think is very good. On page 3 of your documents, we have some strategies: stay the urban growth boundary land exchange process, commit to finding resources to support redevelopment of land that is currently within the UGB, fund a study, and develop tangible commitments that Metro can make now to provide critical infrastructure to areas near Happy Valley. And there's some ABCs under that as well. I'm assuming that we all have read that. I have made many statements, and please go to the very end of the letter. The second to last paragraph, the last sentence, the last paragraph, and it says Clackamas County is not willing to be a donor county. And I've been saying that a lot because we're being viewed as, county, gee, we have all this land available and you're not doing anything with it, so we're going to take it and use it for our purposes, as that's how it feels. And so in addition to that, I have added, Commissioners, and you have the language in front of you, Clackamas County is not willing to be a donor county, and while other jurisdictions expand their housing and jobs lands inventory at the sacrifice of Clackamas's great land base. I'd like to add that, and I think maybe you have that language available to you that Emily supplied. So, Commissioners, comments, please. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I don't have any quarrel with the addition or the change that you recommend. I did want to emphasize a couple things, and being that Dan's here today, maybe ask him a couple questions directly that I think I know the answer to, but maybe it would be good for everyone to hear that. So, first of all, last time we spoke on this, I mentioned the economics, and we needed more time, so I appreciate the stay will give us the time to look at some of the economics, and the economics is multifaceted. It's certainly just not one avenue. We just talked about wastewater, projections and so forth at PSU, and everyone's used for years using the land that's in the UGB for some of those projections. But I want to bring up another example, and I touched on it last time, but I want to put some a better example forward. So back when Wilsonville wanted to expand their urban renewal district to accommodate the Frog Pond development, my concern then, which after studying all the transportation issues on Stafford Road, was the diversion or the traffic coming from these developments, future developments, would be going through a rural road, Stafford Road, to, let's say, 205. And the Wilsonville studies showed that increase would be 17 to 25% increase in traffic on that road. However, the ability for the city to pay for that, or unwillingness, or maybe it's challenging. If it's outside their city boundary, they almost really can't fund that. And there's really no means to fund growth when something like that happens. But it really highlighted, my point here, it really highlighted the fact that had Stafford Road been in the urban growth boundary, we would be eligible for Metro dollars and other funds to accommodate that growth, its safety features and so forth. But because it's rural, right, along this urbanized corridor, frankly, an urbanized area, 205, we don't have the fund. We have very few funds and very few funding opportunities to get anything done on Stafford Road. Well, the same applies here. And when you look at these areas where they have, each of these 3 areas that Metro has cited has subdivisions in them. So we have population in there. There's probably going to be future development one way or another, whether it's in or out. And yet there's no good funding mechanism for the rural areas, far more challenged than the urban areas. So I think that's another one of the economic aspects that needs to be examined here, is that we'll be putting in a far more difficult position to fund those because we're taking away a funding source, so to speak, or won't be eligible for funding sources they currently have today when they're in the UGB. Those are a few of that, but maybe we can refine that, but I think the urgency here is probably more about our letter, and I don't disagree with that, but I just wanted to highlight that just one more example, and there's more, of the economics of how this is impacted, and I really think that somehow we need to be made whole. We went into this with, when I first got on the commission, the urban rural reserves discussion was already underway. Martha, you were one of the point people for that, part of the Core Four, right?
At the beginning.
Yep, at the beginning,
Until I
right.
went to the Senate.
And then when it went to the Senate, it was Commissioner Lehan who took that role. My point is this, so we worked on this regionally to get where we are, and we didn't get settled about, 2016, I believe, when Commissioner Humberston and Commissioner Bernard were here. But when we finally got all that settled. But the point I'm making here is that regionally, we all partook in that and came up with a solution and finalized that. It seems strange or wrong, essentially, principally, that Metro itself unilaterally could come along and just say, pluck, pluck, we're going to change it. And you have no say. That part, it just doesn't seem, just seems antithetical. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schrader, I'm not sure who is next.
Do you want to go, or do you want me to go? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
You're up, Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you. I think this conversation is really important, and it's good for us to engage deeply as a board on the issues that affect Clackamas County. So I embrace all of this conversation and discussion about what we need for our community. What I'm concerned about and where my position is at this moment, when we voted last Tuesday to consider any and all options, I was not aware that that was code to potentially develop south of the Willamette River. I didn't realize that until I got input from the community, from French Prairie, saying, this is a real concern for us. Given our strategic priorities about agricultural production, that we are interested in a 10% increase in food production and food production acres from agricultural lands in Clackamas County. In my mind, our rural reserves were off the table, were not part of that discussion. So I'm very concerned about this board making any taking any position that would suggest that we should look at development south of the Willamette River, where, in my understanding, and if commissioners, if I'm wrong, you can tell me. I've looked at studies, I've looked at maps, I've looked at soil composition in the areas of Clackamas County. It's my understanding that that is some of the prime farmland in the region in the state. So if I'm wrong, I will stand to be corrected, but that is the information, the base that I have. Those rural reserves were designated rural reserves for a reason. So I am concerned. I will not sign on to a letter that opens that up for our suggesting potential development for this land swap. So my view is we have a critical need for expansion for housing in the region. It affects all of us. Putting any roadblocks in the way to stay or stop the potential housing development that is planned and ready to go is detrimental to all of us in the region. We have a critical need to increase more supply so that we can get to limit the demand in a way that creates more capacity. We must do that because our housing costs are absolutely through the roof. So I am not opposed to this land swap. We do not have a legal pathway to object in this. This is in the law that Metro can do this. They are not stepping outside of what is legally allowed. I don't see this as a punitive approach. I've leaned in a little bit farther with Metro to get a little bit more clarification about their outreach. Damascus CPO residents, when they went to that meeting, most were okay. There was one individual who was opposed because interested in development. The other areas that they reached out to were not opposed to having these areas taken out of the urban growth boundary. Now, what I see as a collaborative and responsible approach to this issue is for us to say, okay, Metro, you have the legal authority to do this. But you know what? When it comes to us needing what we need in the region, we really want to look at areas that may be outside of the urban growth boundary that need to be brought in, especially those areas around Happy Valley that are prime for increased development, and also potential industrial employment lands. But at the same time, it's the position of this board to protect and preserve those rural agricultural lands, because that is precious to Clackamas County and to the future for our ability to produce food and for not only our region, but for the state and beyond. So I don't support the premise of this letter. I didn't get that memo. I'm sorry that I didn't understand that when I voted to, I left the room for a minute to use the restroom, and so I abstained when I came back.
Which memo?
Well, the idea that this effort before us today is really to expand
I don't think anybody.
options
I don't-
beyond,
Well,
south of
you're
the
gonna,
Willamette.
you're gonna be corrected on that.
Okay, well, I will be happy to be corrected if that is what I need to be, because
Did you read the letter?
Did I look at this letter?
Take a look at number 1. We're doing exactly what you said. Stay the urban growth boundary land exchange process until such time the results of the Oregon Semiconductor Competitiveness
Yeah.
Task Force can be incorporated into the discussion. And I, too, have been reaching out to Metro counselors, and most of them seem to really like that idea, because as my follow-up to that was, and then we all can sit down together and design a plan that makes everybody happy.
Okay, I was going to comment on that as well. My conversations with Metro, this decision for their timeline coincides with the chip manufacturing report, so there's not a need to stay anything. This is not a problem. It's all going to coincide.
We don't know that for sure. As pointed out in Metro's own schedule that has been presented by our staff here today, we don't know that for sure. They've never said, what they're going to do on that.
Well, my position is that us taking a constructive approach with Metro to highlight what Clackamas County needs is the best approach in moving forward, getting what we need on the record, which most of this is great. We need to prioritize funding for needed transportation investment, support retention for Sunrise Corridor, support the Sunrise Corridor Community Visioning Project. We need to identify key employment and industrial lines in Clackamas County, including land that may be in reserves while protecting key agricultural farmland is how I would word that, and develop near-term strategies for
Okay.
industrial. I mean, there are real deep concerns out there, and I think that they are valid concerns that we as a board could really clarify.
Okay. We have several commissioners in the queue. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so Commissioner Fisher, I'm looking at the letter as you were speaking. I don't know what code you're talking about or what memo you're talking about. I appreciate the fact that Sunrise Corridor.
I was speaking figuratively,
Sunrise,
Paul.
pardon?
Let him finish.
No, I know, but I was speaking figuratively.
Let
I
him
just want to
finish.
make sure.
That figuratively is, it's a little bit concerning because it seemed to be accusatory to all of us here, so I don't appreciate that. But that said, I see under number 4, ABC, I do appreciate the fact that we're talking about the Sunrise Corridor. So if there's any area that's listed in here, again, if you're seeing something about some other area here, that's the only area I see listed as a Sunrise Corridor per se, and the Visioning Project, which is something I've been passionate about for well over beyond my term here, my 12 years as a commissioner. So that's the only area I see that's got any specificity to it. Am I missing something? Or
Yeah,
do you have a different letter?
Under number 3, it doesn't clarify urban reserves. It says, and may be in the reserves, which by omission could include rural reserves.
Well, I think the vote we took was to look at all options.
Yeah.
Right.
So I didn't think that developing south of the Willamette was an option. But given that, if we clarify that, I'm going to be much more on board with proceeding with our input to Metro.
Okay, but we have Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I'm almost finished here. I don't have a problem with the letter. And the fact is this, I said it again, I said it last week, I said it a little bit today, but I'll just focus in on it. I know that the Metro work cited that some of the citizens within some of these 3 areas were for it. I don't think that they have been fully informed of some of these things, nor do I even think that the work has been done to even properly inform them today. So the fact that there's a study involved in this, or a suggestion that a study is being done, the economics, I just don't think that Metro, frankly, has done their homework on the economic impacts. I think that Washington County, or what's their proposal out there, probably has a lot more economic work being done and I'm probably sure have no quarrel with any of that whatsoever. I'm sure it's positive, positive, positive. But the question is, are there negatives for us? And if they are, they should be mitigated. I think it's our job as elected Clackamas County Commissioners to make sure that there are no negatives. And if you feel good about we have adequate information to make that call today, then you know something I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
Yeah, I like the idea of cooperating with our colleagues. Sometimes I don't feel that way, but I guess I'm feeling in a cooperative mood today, so I understand that. And cooperation means that there is going to be negotiations to be had about this issue, because I do think that it is a bad precedent to, if you're going to juggle it, you juggle it fairly. And I think from my perspective, that just means that negotiation and wherever this lands is all going to be on the table, more than likely. And it will be discussed at MPAC and I imagine some at JPAC. So again, I have no issue with Tigard and cooperating with Metro and Tigard getting land for needed regional housing. That's not the point. I do think we need to send this letter. I think it's a good letter, and I think that in the spirit of good faith, that we need to negotiate, and we need to make sure that we are not losing any land for potential development as we move forward, wherever that may land. We haven't even gotten that far yet. So I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, I support the letter and the changes. I believe that it asserts this county's needs to be weighed in the decision on how Metro is going to weigh in on these 3 options. I do have one more question for Mr. Johnson on the tax issue. To be clear, this is an issue people are asking about. Please clarify. If somebody has a house or land in one of these 3 options and they're moved out of the urban growth boundary, it will not affect the taxes levied on their property from Metro unless, because the Metro district boundary doesn't change. They're in the Metro district boundary and they're taxed, or they're out of the Metro district boundary and not taxed. So this won't affect anyone's taxation from Metro. Is that correct?
That is correct. Their tax authority is established in discussions with assessment and tax. The taxation authority for Metro is established by their district boundary, not their urban growth boundary.
Right, got it. Okay, good. Thanks for clarifying that. The next MPAC meeting is 9 November, and at that meeting, we'll already have this board's letter on this issue signed, so we can take it there for
Yes.
discussion?
If approved.
Yes. Yeah, I'll entertain a motion in a
Okay.
minute.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're going to have to move along on the discussion because we have one more issue that we need to take up today that is timely. I will entertain a motion that we sign this letter as amended from myself on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners.
So moved. Seconded?
Commissioner Savas has moved that we send this letter, and Commissioner Scholl has seconded the motion. Commissioner Fisher, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that I would be much more amenable to signing on to this if we clarified that we are not interested in looking at the rural reserves or prime agricultural assets.
And I have discussed with you too, Dan, I would like a map of what prime farmland is, secondary lands, secondary farmlands. I believe they're designated as type 1 and 2. I know there's the assertion that some areas are like the best farmlands in the world. I think that's misinformation on some areas. Some areas are very good farmland. For instance, in Canby, where it's being built on outside the Canby urban growth boundary, is some of the best farmland really in the West Coast. I also want to have this commission be aware of something. The concept of rural reserves only exists within the metro area of the Tri-Counties area. Our neighbors to the south, Marion County, has no such designation of rural reserves, nor does any other county in the state of Oregon. So I think that needs to be considered as well, too. There is a motion on the table. I see no further discussion. Tony, please call the poll.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Abstain.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 401. And we're going to move on to the next item. Commissioner Fisher, please be brief.
Yeah, so what I will do, and I'll distribute this to my colleagues because I do support asserting ourselves with Metro in how this process has played out. I'm going to write a separate letter with my own testimony, which I will submit under my own name, and I will make sure that everyone knows what that will be, and I really appreciate the conversation today.
Good for you. Up next, Gary.
Okay, in interest of time, I'm jumping ahead to the Johnson Creek Watershed Council support request because that is timely and we need a decision today. Dan will present. There is a memo. Go ahead, please, Dan.
Okay, this is just an FYI and just an update to the board. Essentially, we're just looking for the board to give a head nod of support to assist in the Johnson Creek Watershed Council in their pursuit of a grant for construction of the Badger Creek at Rug Road culvert replacement. What does that mean to you? We have two culverts there. Both are corrugated metal, 36 inches in diameter, 52 feet long. Both culverts are in poor condition, rusted throughout. They have to be replaced. We're proposing to replace them with a 10-foot wide diameter culvert. Estimated construction, $320,000. Basically, this is simply a request to support Johnson Creek Watershed Council's request for funding, because essentially, if we were going to replace these culverts, they'd be on our backs from the road fund. They are looking to support, to do a request, IIJA grant applications, and package this project with a number of projects to make it a more robust grant request. Essentially, just if the board is of support of this, there's no letter needed, there's no action needed right now. We just want to make sure you are aware of it, that you're in support of it. Essentially, if they are able to secure this grant, then we do not have to dedicate road funds for that particular project to replace that culvert. So,
Do we need to vote on this, Gary?
I would make a motion that you approve it, so we have it for the record, please.
Yeah, I think we do, Dan. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Dan, you seconded. All righty. So Commissioner Savas has moved that we approve a grant application, is that correct? No,
we approve support of the Johnson Creek Watersheds Council's grant request.
yes, we approve Johnson Creek's council's support of a grant request to do the 52-foot-long culvert, and Commissioner Schull has seconded that motion. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Schull.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. You know, it looks, as far as the agenda here, is we can probably go ahead and do the ABC on the Timber Sale Advisory Committee.
Yes, please, if we could.
And that, Gary?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going
After
to
this, a later date?
Tony?
Timber Sale Advisory Committee, staffed by Department of Transportation and Development's Forest and Timber Management Program, currently has 2 openings on their committee. One opening was opened by resignation, the other is due to a need for citizen representation. There are 2 members recommended. The first is Eric Pfeiffer Robinson as the Parks Advisory Board representation. The second is Marjorie Stewart as the Citizen at-Large representation. Both would be for first terms.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Move to approve.
Yeah, Commissioner Scholl has moved we appoint Eric Pfeiffer Robertson as a BAP representative and Marjorie Stewart as a Citizen at-Large representative for our Timber Sale Advisory Board. Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Gary?
All right, so the Portland Water Bureau Bull Run filtration plant will bring back to you later. There was a memo in your packet. The long story short is there's been no action because no permit has been filed to request an emergency access road. So until it does, we're not doing it, and we'll talk to you before we do. So, but we're bringing that back for further discussion. Business meeting agenda, all the consent agenda items from this week, and you have 3 public hearings on annexation requests. And then finally, Commissioner Communications today, Chair.
Commissioner Communication, usually we want to be out of here by noon. I'll ask your comments to be brief. Who wants to speak first?
Chair Smith, considering the time, I'd like to just make my comments on Thursday. Yeah.
Okay. Martha does the same. Paul, what would you like? Make a
I
comment?
too
Go ahead.
will defer my comments till Thursday.
Commissioner Fisher. Well, it looks unanimous. We will all defer our comments to Thursday. Thank you, commissioners, for showing up and doing a good work. Seeing no further business before this commission, we are adjourned.